The next speaker is a total and complete asshole, and there's rotten tomatoes out back. Paul Elam is an absolutely amazing individual. He is the founder and publisher of A Voice for Men, and he is a satirist at heart that has been remarkably supportive of Kennesaw State University men. And Paul Elam has started A Voice for Men and a semi, and has been establishing it from a one-man blog into now an international publication. And how many languages is it now, Paul? 8 languages.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that A Voice for Men Farsi and A Voice for Men Hebrew were launched together, and the people behind it are working together. It is an absolutely outstanding publication. It's an absolutely outstanding publication that has skyrocketed in traffic, and it has bypassed many feminist publications in terms of the discourse on gender issues, and I believe it's around 2,200 readers an hour. It's become one of the most visited sites in the United States, and if not the world, and it's just going on the up and up. Now, in regards to Kennesaw State University men, I'd like to make a kind of a personal note here, because Paul has been, he's made it possible for Kennesaw State University men to publicize their fundraisers. He's made it possible for us to be put on the map in regards to a student organization, because in many respects, KSUM is a pretty remote part of the men's rights movement. It's pretty disconnected from a lot of the other activities going on, since we're kind of a constellation of different activities. But it was only with A Voice for Men's help that we actually got a huge outreach, the media connections and things like that. I really do believe. And what made this so, just what touched me so much is I know that Paul wouldn't do this for just anybody. And his generosity has been remarkable, as well as the generosity of the AVFM staff. And I want to, again, just a preemptive round of applause for all the support that the entire staff has been offering, please. And I didn't want to come off with the rest, I'm kissing too much ass here. But what Paul Elam is going to be talking about, the hysteria regarding the concept of rape culture. And he's going to be giving us an idea about how to discern between the realities of a crime versus the packaging of a concept for the benefit of a select few who want to profit from an ideological view of crime and masculinity. So please welcome Paul Elam, the founder of A Voice for Men.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to congratulate the Kennesaw State University Fire Prevention Program. Not a single alarm all evening, so hats off. That's wonderful. I also want to thank the Kennesaw State University administration and faculty for allowing this conference to happen, at least those of you who didn't engage in a contemptuous campaign to slur Sage Gerard. Sage went through a lot to put this thing on, and was demonized and vilified, and every day leading up to this event establishes exactly why we need to be. And I'm really glad to be here. Okay, before I get started tonight, just one more thing I want to add, that there has been some questioning tonight about what does the men's movement do? I mean, other than bitch about feminists. And bitching about feminism is fun. The thing is, as I just pointed out with Sage, talking about these issues is an act of revolution in this culture. Simply standing up and speaking to this is activism. Don't ever be fooled to think otherwise. Too many have paid the price for doing it. Okay, let's talk about rape culture. Let's see what we got here. It is a concept that examines a culture in which rape is pervasive and normalized due to societal attitudes about gender and sexuality. Show of hands, who supports rape? Who thinks rape is normal? Come on. Nobody? Who associates with somebody personally that supports rape? How can this be a cultural phenomenon? How can we have a culture that supports rape when not even one person in this room raised their hand? Where did we get this idea that we live in a rape culture? Well, it's a complicated question with a lot of answers, but let's start with the 1 in 4 statistic. I love that. I'm going to be doing some reading here and switching back and forth, so you have to bear with me a little bit as we go along. But there's a theory about how rape culture emerged. Heather McDonald, an opinion writer, speculated that during the 1980s, feminist researchers committed to the rape culture theory had discovered that asking women directly if they had been raped yielded disappointing results. Very few women said they had been. So Ms. Magazine commissioned University of Arizona public health professor Mary Koss to develop a different way of measuring the prevalence of rape. Rather than asking female students about rape per se, Koss asked them if they had experienced actions that she then classified as rape. Koss's method produced the 25% rate, which Ms. then published. Some interesting points on Koss's research, in particular key questions in the survey. The last 3 questions were the ones that qualified as actual rape. Questions 8, it was 10-question survey, questions 8, 9, and 10. Number 8, have you had sexual intercourse when you didn't want to because a man gave you alcohol or drugs? I want to think about that one for a minute. Have you had sexual intercourse when you didn't want to because a man threatened or used some degree of physical force, twisting your arm, holding you down to make you? And number 10, have you had sexual acts, anal or oral intercourse or penetration by objects other than a penis when you didn't want to because you were threatened? That 27.5% of those who answered yes to any of these questions, any of those 3 questions, is where the 1 in 4 number comes from. However, Koss herself admitted in 1992 that her question relating to sex after consuming alcohol was misleading, and that if omitted, the study actual number was reduced to 1 in 9. But we also need to consider the fact of Koss's alleged rape victims, only 25% of which stated they had been raped. If you consider the victims at their word, that drops Koss's number to 1 in 33. This is not even considering the fact that affirmative answers to Koss's first question, have you ever given into sex play, fondling, kissing, or petting, but not intercourse when you didn't want to because you were overwhelmed by a man's continual arguments and pressure, also counted as sexual victims. Perhaps it was Koss's questionable methodology, the ideological and financial motivations behind it, and a good long look at the actual rape statistics prompted McDonald to conclude it's a lonely job working the phones at a college rape crisis center. Day after day, you wait for the casualties to show up from alleged campus rape epidemic, but no one calls. Could this mean that the crisis is overblown? No. It means, according to the rape campus sexual assault industry, that the abuse of co-eds is worse than anyone imagined. It means that consultants and counselors need more funding to persuade student rape victims to break their silence, break the silence of their suffering. What does McDonald mean by the sexual assault industry? On April 4th, 2011, Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights Ruslan Ali, head of the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, the OCR, distributed a 19-page Dear Colleague letter to provide recipients with information to assist them in meeting their obligations. At the cost of losing federal funding, on which all major institutions of higher education have grown dependent, colleges and universities are obliged under Title IX of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex, to thoroughly investigate all allegations of sexual harassment and sexual assault on campus, including the felony rape. They are also obliged, according to Ms. Hawley, to curtail due process rights of the accused. OCR's new interpretation of Title IX strongly discourages universities from permitting the accused to question or cross-examine the accuser during the hearing. In addition, if universities provide an appeals process, it must be available to both parties, which subjects the accused to double jeopardy. Most egregiously, OCR requires universities to render judgment using a preponderance of the evidence standard. That means in a rape case, a campus disciplinary board of faculty, administrators, and perhaps students serves both as judge and jury. Few, if any, of these judges are likely to have professional competence in fact gathering, evidence analysis, or judicial procedure, yet to deliver a verdict of guilty, they need only believe that the accused is more likely than not to have committed the crime. Let's pretend for a moment that this imperfect as it is all for the best in the name of protecting rape victims. Let's pretend that this kind of messaging, thank you. Let's pretend that this kind of messaging, targeting all men with the message that they need to be shamed out of raping women while pretending that telling actual rapists not to rape will actually stop. Let's pretend that men everywhere need to be told that this is not an invitation to help themselves. Let us even pretend that this is a noble effort by young women to stop a culture of victim blaming rather than just being a parade of attention-seeking personality disorders. So why really is all this a problem? I want to introduce you to Caleb Warner, a University of North Dakota student. Caleb Warner met a girl at a frat party. They had drinks. They eventually had sex. He went on holiday for a few days and came back. Afterwards, he was pulled out of class by the administrator and told that he had been charged with rape. He was found guilty. He was kicked out of school. His education was in ruins. His reputation was in ruins. The woman eventually also filed a police report about the rape. The police investigated. Not only did they find no merit in it, they found that she was lying and issued a warrant for her arrest for making a false police statement. She fled the state to avoid prosecution, and the University of North Dakota said, "We don't care. You're still out." It took him years and a lot of money to finally get his name cleared. The university finally lifted the ban on him. He is not, however, returning to school. He's doing deliveries in Fargo, I believe, and says he can't even drive by the university anymore. Why is this a problem? Indeed. Next, we have the story, and I'm sure some of you will be familiar with it, of Judith Grossman. She is a card-carrying, or was a card-carrying feminist. Her son texted her one day and said, "Call me in a hurry, it's really important." A former girlfriend, somebody he hadn't seen in years, had accused him of sexual assault. Luckily for him, Judith Grossman is an attorney, and she worked real hard and finally got him cleared and got the charges dropped. And she wrote an editorial piece for the Wall Street Journal lamenting, how could this have happened? How could any of this be happening? And she asked, who knew that American college students are required to surrender the Bill of Rights at the campus gates. We knew. Those of us in this room have known for years. The answer to Grossman's question is the men and women of the men's human rights movement, and for quite some time. And we have been talking about it, and it also appears that others are learning. RAIN, the nation's largest anti-sexual assault organization, one of America's top 100 best charities according to Worth magazine, has urged the White House to form a task force to overhaul colleges' treatment of rape. After the White House requested feedback on the problem of campus sexual assaults, RAIN urged the White House to abandon the notion of rape culture, and I quote, "In the last few years, there has been an unfortunate trend towards blaming rape culture for the extensive problem of sexual violence on campuses. While it is helpful to point out the systemic barriers to addressing the problem, it is important not to lose sight of a simple fact. Rape is caused not by cultural factors, but by conscious decisions of a small percentage of the community to commit a violent crime." That was put in a letter to the task force from RAIN's President Scott Berkowitz and Vice President for Public Policy Rebecca O'Connor. No reply from the White House so far. So, what is rape? It's a crime. It's a vicious crime, whether it's committed against a man or a woman or a child. And it is a crime that is committed against men, women, and children. There could be a whole different talk on that subject alone. But what is rape culture? Rape culture is a product, and it's being peddled on university campuses like crack, and it's being bought over and over and over again. It is a myth. It does not exist. It is no more real than a patriarchy that abuses and takes advantages of women for the sole pleasure of men. We need to talk about this stuff, but talking about it really is a lot more difficult than it seems. Dr. Fiamengo mentioned Warren Farrell's lecture at the University of Toronto. Steve Brule, who's filming here tonight, filmed part of that. And if you've watched that video, you saw as a young man was spittle flying rage at him for daring to want to walk in the door and to hear about what was happening to boys and men. And Steve interviewed him a few minutes after that moment, and it turned out that this young man had had two friends kill themselves in very short order, just one right after the other. And he was looking for closure on why he lost two friends. And he was spat at and called rape apologist, incest apologist, abuser, woman hater, misogynist, every name in the book, simply for wanting to walk into a door. If somebody wants to know why we have issues with negotiating with feminists, does that not explain it? Erin Pitsey, one of our editors at large, is the woman who started the battered women's shelter movement in Cheswick, England in 1971. Erin, on a shoestring budget, on basically handouts, started a shelter for women to give them a place to go, and she began the study of these abused women. And she found, after years of looking at the problem, that many of the women in her shelter were as abusive or more abusive than the men they were apparently running from. When she published that and she went public with it, she was stalked, she was harassed by members of a domestic violence industry that had seen a cash cow in domestic violence and Aaron Pitsey was in the way. They shot her dog. She had the bomb squad at her home and eventually felt so unsafe that she moved to the United States. This is the feminism we're dealing with, not the one in the dictionary. During our last conference, a Voice for Men conference, we had a great time there after the death threats, after we had to move venue, after we had to have an emergency fundraiser for police protection because people were threatening us. And it's really funny, they had a great big, not great big, they made it bigger than it was. They had a protest in downtown Detroit, and I remember a photograph from that, and feminists were carrying a banner down the street, stretched wide all the way across the street, and it said, "Feminism is for everyone." And I wondered, is that an invitation to belong or a command to submit? Well, folks, I want to thank everybody for coming here. I want to thank you, Sage, for allowing me the privilege of speaking here. And I just want to end this by asking you to consider a couple of things. People have been asking, what are the answers to these problems? Well, what would it be like if 5 years from now there were 10 or 15 of these meetings going on university campuses in the fall semester? What would it mean if there were 30 or 40 of these meetings going on college campuses in the fall semester? We can do this. This room right here is proof that we can change the dialogue. We've had a lot of questions about what to do, what we need to do, what A Voice for Men is trying to do, what KSUM is trying to do, what all these good people associated are trying to do is simply change the dialogue, change the nature of the talk. All this whole paradigm about women as victims and men as perpetrators, and instead build bridges between men and women based on human dignity. That is a connection that can happen if we allow it. Right now, there are millions and millions of grandmothers who can't see their grandchildren because of a corrupt family court. There are millions of second wives out there who live at or below poverty because the first wife is draining the husband through the courts. We need to encourage these women to speak up. This is why we have always invited women into the fold at A Voice for Men. It's because without a unified voice, we will have what we've had for the last 100 years, which is nothing. We've got something now. Let's move on. Thank you.
Paul, you left about 1 billion years for Q&A. All right, so we 27 minutes left. Would you like to dedicate all of that to Q&A, or would you rather?
Stay up here as long as people have questions.
All right, Q&A, people. And after this Q&A, we're gonna have a 30-minute break. Then we'll do my speech, and then following that, a panel where you can ask any speaker any question you'd like. Then we will adjourn and close for the night. Thank you for your patience. Q&A time. Let's go.
Boy, that must have been a complete speech. Uh-oh, here comes Danny.
One day in Army. Your top of your speech is very cultured, but as I understand it, in the United States Penal Code, rape is defined as penetrative act. Should it not be forced sex and that's it?
Well,
Example.
it's an interesting question. It was only a couple of years ago that changed, that the FBI revised the definition of rape to include only penetration. Really interesting change, and during really interesting times. Why all of a sudden, instead of forced unwanted sex, and of course if you look at the justice statistics on forced envelopment, which happens a lot, the numbers are nearly up there with forced penetration. You've got a great question there, and again, I think that the answer is the same. When we start changing the dialogue about this, when we no longer accept, let me take this a step further. Somebody asked me, that's writing for the school newspaper outside, what A Voice for Men was, if I could put it in a nutshell. And I said A Voice for Men is the expressed anger of people who are tired of injustice. That, when you start asking about what makes social movements happen, ask yourself as you look back through history, if you can find a single social movement that made 1 inch of progress without people being angry. There is none. The trick is that we need to channel the anger productively. We've got a lot of angry men out there right now. If you go to the MGTOW forums, you'll see them. And they've got every reason to be angry. What we want to do at A Voice for Men is to provide a conduit for that to be developed and to channel that anger in a constructive way. And then we can address your question and a whole lot more.
Thanks, Paul. And I just want to leave one more quote. Quote your 15 meetings in 5 years there. I think Virgil said it best, they can because they think they can.
My own brother. Hi, Mark.
Do you have any advice for anyone who wants to help, or what more can I do?
I don't know, what can you do? That's not a sarcastic response, honestly. I get asked that a lot. I get emails a lot from people saying, what can I do? And what I challenge people to do when they ask me that is to ask themselves what they can do. Do you have computer skills? Do you have writing skills or public speaking skills? Anything else that you can think of, graphic design, video production, anything that you can think of that you can bring to the media platforms, to anything that we're doing, that is what you can do. And there's always a need for more. We've got lots of room for talent. That's a good question, thank you. Yes, sir.
Hey, how you doing, Paul?
Good.
This is just an inspiration to get to talk to you. I was wondering, what do you think is the biggest obstacle that the men's rights movement faces? And what's the next step moving forward?
Fear. Fear, without a doubt. Fear of standing up, fear of being rejected socially, fear of professional reprisals, fear of being ostracized, fear of being rejected by members of your family. That is the big thing that they got on us, is fear. They have so effectively painted any dissent from feminism as misogyny and any disagreement with them as unholy, that people are afraid to speak. But look around you, that is changing. And the solution for that is for more people to speak. It means some people are going to have to take some hits. Goodness knows I take them all the time. So Janice Fiamengo, Straughan, all kinds of people in here taking risks of rejection. Screw it. Talk anyway. When they tell you to shut up, talk some more. Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here. Let me just ask you, the issues we've talked about today that have been so enormous and so numerous, we haven't even talked about all of them. There are all kinds of other men's issues, Title IX athletics, fathers and their unborn children. Where do we begin? Maybe this is kind of the question that was already asked, but do we just, am I supposed to just pick out one? I mean, if I were to try to address all of the issues, I'd just run out of time. Do I just pick one that's important and focus on that one, or where do we begin? It seems like David and Goliath here.
It is. It is, David. It doesn't seem that way. It's actually bigger than that. It's like going up against a religion as a lonely skeptic. You're right about the number of subjects. We had a conference in St. Clair Shores, Michigan. We had 14 speakers, and we scratched the surface, barely scratched the surface. I mean, this is a huge subject area. Why? Because nobody's looked at it for the longest time. What you can do is whatever you're going to feel passionate to do. If you want to pick one thing and focus on it, do that. Just talk about it. Produce information on it. If you want to do 10 things, do that. It doesn't matter. If you want to, whatever you want to do, find something to do and start doing it. That's the only answer I can give you, because nobody can take on all of this. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
It's not on.
No, it's not.
All right. So,
We can't hear you, sir.
Mic's off. Check the mic, it's off.
Wait 5 seconds.
wait,
Now.
battery.
Oh, it says battery.
Yeah, battery's going out.
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Here we go.
So, I got a question from the Twitter sphere here.
Go ahead, hit me with it.
Let's see. If courts are unfair and alimony is unfair, and the ways, custody aside are unfair, how, do we address that? How do we fix that? The feminists and the men's human rights movement working together to fix that.
How are we going to fix that? Feminists and the men's human rights movement working together. Ooh. How are we going to, we're not going to fix that working with feminists until feminists change. And that is not meant to say that there's not good-willed, good-natured people in the feminist movement, because there's lots of them. We have an open invitation to anybody, feminist or otherwise, to join us in this work. In the meantime, to be honest with you, to be really honest, the only thing that I can recommend about family courts is to avoid the setup of getting in there in the first place. There's marriage for young men or older ones is a dangerous decision. I still think, we do advocacy work for fathers, and we believe in supporting them, regardless of whatever decisions they make. We don't want to pass judgment on them. And I don't pass any judgment on any man that wants to get married. However, I do want to say that if you look at the math, if you look at what happens to men in our family courts, you come to understand that you don't marry a woman, you marry the state.
Yep.
How many men have kids that never got married or wanted to get married or even wanted to have kids? The decision to have a child does not rest with the man.
Yep.
Period.
Yep.
And there's another area, reproductive rights. I mean, there's a million things that we could talk about, but what I recommend to answer the Twitter question is that if you want to personally avoid the tragedy of family court, don't get married. And number two, if you want to change things for the better, then join some of these activist groups that are trying to get reform to the family courts. They're out there. They're working now. Go give them some of your time. And hopefully we can repair this thing to the point that it is at least an equal risk for both partners entering a marriage contract. But until then, no thank you, buddy. And that appears to be it. Once again, Thank you all.
No.
It's been a great time. Oh, I'm sorry. Here, I'll give you the microphone.
No, I don't want the microphone, I'll yell.
Okay?
I'm a behind-the-scenes person, not out front like Sage. I'm his mother. I'm very proud of what he is. I came here tonight hoping to hear that you guys were talking about how you could change, what you could do. The only pieces of information that I found helpful tonight at all came from the first speaker when he talked about the curriculums in the schools and the suicide rate and perhaps what teachers, how they should be trained. The rest of it, you're just bashers. And I don't think you show proper respect to the women who are out here like me, fighting. I've been doing this long enough that some of the women here take for granted the rights that we got for them. And listening to your, you make it all black and white, like there aren't complex layers. The pendulum swings. Women finally can speak out and be heard and not be treated. You listed all the things like, oh, how fear, and then you started itemizing. Those were all the reasons I couldn't report a rape when I was a teenager. Now women can, and it will actually be heard. We're not the enemy.
Why couldn't you have reported rape when you were young? Of course you could have.
No, I
It happened all the
could
time.
not.
Sure you
No,
could have.
Sure, and it would have been publicly connected to me for the rest of my life.
No, that man
I
would have been
failed.
jailed.
Let me interrupt for a second, Gary. Thank you.
He said, she said, and they didn't
The
listen.
only thing that I can suggest to you is that there is a growing number of men and women, both lay people and experts in the industries we're addressing, that do find this useful. And it's happening all the time. With all respect to you, ma'am, this is not about your personal experience. It is about the experiences of men in our culture, and this is what they're experiencing.
So why aren't you talking about getting out here, working with the legislature, and working with the school boards to try to make changes in the curriculum?
We do that.
We do that.
Y'all have had 8 hours tonight, and I haven't heard anything from y'all.
Well, I appreciate your opinion. Well,
No,
what can I say?
Okay.
Okay. What can I say? This conference was arranged and the topics were chosen by speakers who were invited to speak, which is our right to do.
Yeah, you do, but I'm just saying, I think you missed a really good opportunity to educate these people on how they could go and make changes.
Well, we've got some fans in the room, and I think that's great. But,
I didn't come here
but,
tonight to
but
do
the
it.
thing is, are your fans in this room, which I would really respect, are you part of finding those answers? Are you?
Yes, I've worked with,
For men?
I'm a single mom. I have raised an outspoken, politically committed, strong advocate for men.
And so you're to take, you are a credit for Sage's activism.
In part, yes. He was raised to believe he should speak out on these issues.
Well, what can I say? It's a really awkward position for me to be up here arguing with Sage's with the conference host mother, and it feels inappropriate.
Then I'll stop talking.
This is actually remarkable. I was actually really, really happy for one thing. Yes. This is actually, This is actually pretty remarkable. I never thought that we would actually climax the night with my mother arguing with Paul Elam. This is actually, but anyway, I do want to go ahead and state for the record that I'm very, very happy that, for one thing, I've always been worried that feminists would never actually show up to one of these events, and they have, and they've actually, and now through my mother, they've spoken out. And one thing that was very interesting between us is that my mother, being a feminist for very, very long, has created we've had a lot of interesting discussions when I became a men's rights activist, as you can imagine. And I'm really happy that she decided to take this opportunity to speak out. Well, one of the things that I'm hearing, and this is a very common point I hear, is that we are just bashing. It's a repeated point, that we are not actually doing anything to educate the issues. We're not actually doing anything, we're just feminist bashing. But one thing that really is, so this is a huge hurdle for a lot of people, and that is there is such a thing as a humanitarian non-feminist, and these people are very much afraid of feminists and the feminist perspective because of the documented attacks against them, and holding feminism as an establishment to scrutiny based on this is not in any way meant to be a personal attack. It's meant to be a criticism of the system and a desire for a change.
Yep.
And the people who say that we're not doing anything, and I need to remind you that in terms of just my advocacy in Kennesaw State University men, we have been donating food to the CARE program to feed the homeless students on campus. Men or women can get extra food due to KSUM's work and the excellent work of our members over here. KSUM members, stand up. We have approached the Women's Resource and Interpersonal Violence Prevention Center on campus with the intention of building a more equitable interpersonal violence prevention center. And now, through the discussions on potential Title IX concerns, we are now building a men's center to complement the Women's Center on campus by late 2015 with the assistance of Assistant Dean Bob Maddox. And then there's the Resisting Aggression with Defense Course for Men that was in essence, through its execution, was suggesting to men that they are responsible for violence against women. And yet, there was no it wasn't strong enough suggesting that men are responsible for their own safety, and was operating on presumptions of male malice, and has created, we even found, our Secretary and Treasurer Stacey Evans found, that there was some sections of the manual that were flat out plagiarized from, I believe it was menstoppingrape.org, not credited. And so we wanted to have an investigation to build a more equitable self-defense course, and now we have the information to write a formal proposal to the police chief and the people he reports to build a more equitable self-defense course. And we are opening the dialogue. And people say, in light of all of this, you're not doing anything. You're just bashing feminists. You're just bashing feminists. You're bashing, bashing, bashing. But people forget that these are men. This is a movement that I belong to where men are feeling like they have been neglected and they are starting to assert themselves. And when they do so, when we have actually made progress, there's an interesting message that we send. I am a person with feelings and thoughts of my own, and damn it, I am very upset with the representation I've been given and the representation I was promised, or rather the lack thereof, by the feminist movement. Wanting a change is not bashing. Wanting a change is not in any way meant to be an attack on character. And it is disrespectful to the people who work hard and who contribute a lot. These are people who basically are roommates with you and are frustrated that they have to clean the dishes again because the roommate will never do it. These are people who are frustrated that they will never find the representation, and I'm sorry, folks, if you do not like this, but criticizing the feminist movement as a political ideology that is subject to scrutiny just like any other, including our own, is not bashing. It's intellectual honesty and universal accountability, and you have to deal with it. I see one table, not a plug. I see one table, not a plug. Universal accountability is a function of making sure that you do the work to make sure there's an equitable function overall. And this is actually really, I think this is kind of a very timely moment. And I want to thank my mother for, again, coming in and talking about this and making that stand, because that is, the one thing we do share is that outspoken nature. And I love it. I love that outspoken nature that gets that out there. It's fun. It makes life fun. And I tell you, folks, I tell you, the work that we've done has been incredible. And one of the things that I have faced here on this campus are allegations against my character. People have actually said in police reports that I was having fantasies about murdering women. Fantasies about murdering women. People were saying horrible things about me, all because I declared quite publicly that I am not a feminist and I wish to have an egalitarian, humanitarian society that is willing to work on neglected issues affecting men and boys. And I am quite disenfranchised when I hear that the people who are most proclaiming for egalitarianism, for diversity, are actually, yes, I'm sorry folks, they are behind it. And when you listen to the faculty, these are faculty members that are doing this on this campus. These are faculty members that actually found a way to let their fear represent them. And it is fear. Their fear to execute into a, I guess you could say, a litany of investigations meant to abuse apparent credibility to make me look like a monster. And folks, and I gotta tell you folks, I'm not going to let it happen. I'm not going to let that bullying and those accusations of misogyny or bashing stop me from being a better egalitarian than the people in those departments. Look, we at KSUM have offered a specialization that has, I think, offered a level playing field. We don't offer an androcentric view of the world. We offer a specialization that was lacking to fulfill a need. And when we fulfill that need, and we know that we are offering something that is, in essence, not only filling that void, but also counteracting the people who have neglected to fill that void and even sometimes oppose it, I think we get the right to say, you know what, this is bullshit. And you know what? You're bullshit. That's not a personal attack. That's not a personal attack. It is scrutiny. Scrutiny. That is what intellectual honesty is. I became an anti-feminist. Not because I'm an anti-person, but because I'm anti-ideology. Because I am a person that strongly believes that when it comes to ideology, it is something that changes. It's something that becomes, whenever you're a person who's considered with evidence, you don't really have a set ideology. You can take little snapshots. It represents an ideology at that current moment, but it changes with the evidence, it changes with the times. But if you stick with a static worldview, you stick with a presumption that men have a preset level of privilege, that you have start with this presumption that men are malicious and oppressive, you end up with a static worldview that, if implemented in policy, I'm sorry folks, men's human rights activists are going to challenge it again and again and again and again. Deal with it. Another glass of water has decided to rebel, and now there's a puddle. So, anyway, I did end up kind of delivering a quick rant during a time that is not for my speech. But again, I didn't want, Paul, I didn't want you to feel like you were in an awkward position because you were going against my mother. Yeah, right? Oh, there's going to be a, okay, I do appreciate that there's going to be a Twitter storm over this. This is going to be fun. But this was something, folks. This was something. And again, I wanted to, I do want to make a quick note before I put this up. We'll do a quick 30-minute break, then I'll do my real speech. I, again, have always said in my articles on The Voice for Men, I really, really, really wish there were more feminists, even though they disagreed, to show up and voice their disagreement and just show up, period. And that happened. So at the very least, give my mother and KSU guest body a round of applause for showing up. That is fun. Do be prepared for some articles, Mom. So that's just how the internet is. I'm sorry, but it'll blow over soon. But anyway, I will go ahead and say I pretty much took the rest of Paul's time. Let's take a quick 30-minute break, and I'll come in and I'll tell you a little bit about the history of KSUM and where KSU is going in the future.